morning. My name is Joe Laramie, and I am a former Missouri ICAC commander. I am now a program manager with the National Criminal Justice Training Center, and a major responsibility of mine is to support the ICAC Public Awareness Working Group. I've been involved in ICAC for more than 20 years. I'm very honored to be here having a conversation with these amazing panelists. I'm going to introduce my panel first, and then we'll begin with questions. But I'm going to start on your far left and introduce Sean Pierce. Sergeant Sean Pierce with the San Jose Police Department is the Silicon Valley ICAC commander, and he has more than 20 years working in the child exploitation field as well. Next to him is Pauline Stewart. Pauline is a special education educator in the San Jose area, and she is the mother of 2 boys. Sadly, one of those boys was a victim of sextortion. Next to her is Sonia Ryan. Sonia Ryan is from Australia. She is the mother of Carly Ryan. And when Carly Ryan was murdered by an online offender, she took it upon herself to create the Carly Ryan Foundation. She's done amazing work for more than the last decade, and we will hear more from her. Sitting next to me is Dr. Michael Rich. I've known Michael for more than 10 years, and we have been involved over the years in a variety of different prevention-related activities. He is a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital, associate professor at Harvard University, and the director of the Digital Wellness Lab. And his background began before he became a pediatrician. He was involved in film work. And he is now known in the circles of internet crimes against children and digital wellness as the Mediatrician. So welcome all you. Thank you very much. I am truly honored to be sitting here with you. And Pauline, I'm going to start with you and ask you to tell us something about Ryan, about his background, and about his situation that leads you to being here with us today.
My son Ryan was a 17-year-old senior at Ansborough High School. He was looking to study at Washington State University, studying agricultural biotechnology. He was working on his Eagle Scout project. He was a second-degree black belt, a secretary of his chapter FFA. Just an all-around, well-liked, normal child. He last February became a victim of sextortion. The interaction took about 8 hours, but by the end of the 8 hours, he took his life because they had put so much pressure on him.
And Sonia, you have a little different type of story, but nonetheless a horrific situation that you've been through as well. Can you please tell us about Carly?
My daughter Carly was 14 when she began talking to whom she thought was a young boy online. In fact, she was talking to a 50-year-old predator and pedophile who used his own son to gain her trust and convince her to meet with them alone. They murdered her and essentially it was the first crime of its type in Australia. And so it was the entire community was in complete shock, and I realised this was just the beginning and that I had to do something. So it was about transforming my suffering and focusing it towards making sure that what happened to my daughter didn't happen to another innocent child in the future. And so that really propelled Carly's legacy in Australia, and I've been working for over a decade there, and I've now brought Carly's legacy to the United States and have incorporated it here because these crimes against children are borderless, and as far as I'm concerned, we're in the midst of a global pandemic when it comes to online child exploitation. So I'm hoping that my contribution can make a little bit of a difference.
I'm sure it already has. And I want to go to you, Sean, because we've had this conversation many times, and I would guess that everybody in this room would probably be rich if we got a nickel for every time we heard we can't arrest our way out of this. And so I want to talk about the importance of prevention and the work that you do at the Silicon Valley ICAC?
Yeah, so we've all been through cyber tips, and everybody's overwhelmed through cyber tips, and then all of a sudden this sextortion starts rearing its head. And right after Pauline lost her son Ryan, we have a program called Vigilant Parent Program. We decided to do one of the programs for parents, and we had 1,100 parents that showed up to our call. And then we started deciding, we saw the numbers go up. I think the last number I heard of for sextortion was over 8,500 victims. And we started deciding, just like everybody says, you can't rush your way out of it. How are we going to stop this? And we went with prevention and education and putting that message out, not only to parents, but to kids. And I've had several parents that have called me after Ryan's death, and they were at our class, and they called and talked about how it helped them. Because our message is always, say something. If it happens to you, say something, whether you tell a parent, a counselor, one of your friends. And we've had several parents that went to this presentation that their child has come to them when they became a victim of sextortion. And then we decided to talk with Ms. Stewart and invite her to join our task force, which she has over the last year. She's been doing presentations with us kind of all over the country now. So it's the only way that we see that we're gonna fix the problem.
The other thing I failed to mention was that Sean is also the co-chair of the ICAC Public Awareness Working Group, and he's been a great leader in the ICAC program in prevention throughout the country. Dr. Rich, we had a conversation just last week, and you highlighted that you had a conversation with Dr. Murthy, the United States Surgeon General, and his new report that just came out on social media and youth and the mental health of our youth. Could you talk a little bit about the impact of that, the benefits of that, how it's important that we understand what Dr. Murthy has put out for us and given us guidance on?
Sure. Well, I don't need to tell anybody in this room about the headlines and how the headlines are saying social media are ruining a generation, that they're causing anxiety and depression in kids. One of the truly refreshing things about the Surgeon General's advisory that came to all of us is the realization that social media aren't going away. And what we have to do is figure out how to use them in ways that are positive. And actually, I have many patients that I work with who are using social media in very positive ways. We have to remember that social media, like anything, is a tool. It's a very powerful tool, but what changes that tool is how you use it. And so I think that our goal at the Digital Wellness Lab at Boston Children's Hospital is really to both research what the dangers, what the issues are, but also to explore the positives. And we do that under the guidance, in some ways, of the kids themselves, because let's face facts, they use social media and the internet better than we do, and probably always will. What they don't have is the executive functions, the impulse control, the future thinking, and frankly, what we used to call the super ego or the conscience. It is not going to be in place for another decade. And so what we need to do is work with them to empower them through knowledge to use these tools in ways that help them be healthier and smarter and kinder to each other.
That takes me back to you, Pauline, and your work with the Silicon Valley ICAC and talking to parents. When you give them your story, do you get information back from them on the thank you that of what you've provided, but also the information that you provided? What are the keys that you feel like they're hearing that it's going to affect them and make them handle and address situations in their own homes?
First of all, a lot of the parents come into it thinking that it could never happen to their family. And when they see my son's face, they hear his story, they realize it can happen to anybody. And so I talk with them and help them go out and start the conversation with their kids. And so their kids are prepared so they can, if this situation happens, know that they can go to the mom. Tell them to start early having the discussions of, we're there for you no matter what you are, what you do, we are there, we love you. That's the thing that they need to start, is because in the point of time, Ryan's thing, he was so scared, even though we were close, he didn't realize he could just walk down the stairs. So the parents go into it thinking, oh no, it won't happen to us. But being out there and having the discussion, they realize it could happen to any child. They're all victims out there.
Right, and this happened in the evening, am I correct?
Yes, it started around 6 p.m., but by 10 o'clock when I came home with my other son, he was still his happy, normal self. He went to bed at 10, he went to his room, but between 10 and 2, the pressure was on, so pretty much the pressure was 4 hours, and that was enough for him, and he couldn't take it.
And that kind of reminds me that not only should we tell our kids that, please come to me and talk to me, but it should include no matter what time of day or night.
Exactly. Yeah, my younger son happened to notice a light on, and he feels bad because he's like, well, what if he would have just came to the next room? Because anybody, even his friends, say, well, if he would have came to me, even if he would have contacted one of his friends, it would have. So if they don't feel they can talk to you, make sure that they feel that they have somebody that they can talk to.
Right, to help get them through that. Sean, when you're dealing with not only Ryan's case, obviously, but all these other new cases that are coming across your desk and the reports that are coming in, what's the important thing that you want to relay to all of these amazing detectives and ICAC people and other investigators who are out doing this work? What is the thing that you want to tell them how to respond to that call?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is getting services in the beginning, helping these children out. They're reaching out. We're starting to see a lot of children that are self-reporting. It's not coming in from parents. For some reason in San Jose, we get a lot of them, probably get 4 a week. And some are coming cyber tips, but a lot of them are coming in from kids themselves. So we're starting a program where we actually are teaching law enforcement officers. We have a very young department now. So we're teaching law enforcement officers how to handle, because a lot of times they just go there and they think, hey, why'd you send the picture? Okay, I'll write a report, no big deal. But we're showing him, we're gonna treat them the same way we would treat any other victim. And don't try to shame them, take the information down, because that's gonna be the start of the case. By the time it comes to us, sometimes it's too late, it's already done. So we're trying to get the resources as soon as possible, because once an officer writes a report, every agency is probably the same, it may be 2 or 3 days before it gets to the Bureau. And then getting parent involvement. Even though these children are self-reporting, we still have to have the parents, in my opinion, we have to have the parents involved, because who's gonna help the child if it's not the parents in the house? And at least in California, we have a big misconception that children have privacy in that area and we shouldn't be telling the parents. I disagree. I think the parents have to be informed, especially if it's a 15, 16-year-old child. I couldn't imagine seeing my child's name on a police report and I'm the last one to know about it.
Sure. You know, please visit the ICAC Task Force booth down in the exhibit hall. There is a resource that was just created by the ICAC Public Awareness Working Group that you can copy. You can get the information off of the website, off of the ICACtaskforce.org website, and you can copy that 2-page front and back and put your own logo on it, your own resources into it. And it also comes on the ICAC Task Force page with a law enforcement guide to help your street officers know what to do when that bad thing happens to this kid, and so that this child does not report and have someone say, well, there's nothing I can do for you. This says this is what you can do, and these are the places you can get help. And so it's a good resource for all people who are responding to victims of sextortion. So I'm really proud that the ICAC Public Awareness Working Group was able to put that out. Now, Dr. Rich, that kind of leads us back to a question that I have about how do you talk to parents and how do you talk to kids about this issue so that they're accepting it and hearing it and not feeling just the invincible, it won't happen to me kind of feeling?
Well, for one thing, I talk to them both together, rather than one conversation with the parents and one with the kids, so that I am both opening up the conversation, but also modeling for them open conversation about it. One of the things I say to parents is, if you're not ready to talk to your children about pornography, don't give them a smartphone, right? That, I've seen that parents are much more comfortable with the sex talk than they are with the internet talk, because rightly or wrongly, they think they know something about sex, but they don't know anything about the internet. So the first thing I talk to them about is that this is a reality. And if we're going to have smartphones in our lives, then we need to use them in ways that are smart. And that we unfortunately are giving them to kids as a treat for getting straight A's, or as a present for Christmas, but we're not giving them the information and the training, frankly, with these tools that they really need. We have to remember a smartphone is over 1 million times more powerful than the computer that landed Apollo 11 on the moon. Think about that. That's in our kids' pockets. And frankly, from both an educator and a clinician's perspective, about 99.9% of what's on that phone is not necessary for the tasks in their lives. It's mostly distraction, and a lot of it is seduction distraction, if you will. I think the issue also around this is privacy. Kids want their privacy. The problem is, to a 13, 14, 15-year-old, privacy means so mom and dad can't see. It doesn't mean so the rest of the world can't see. They're pretty much oblivious to the rest of the world. So they're broadcasting to the world all the time and making themselves open and vulnerable to it. So I talk very plainly with both the kids and the parents. And oftentimes they're coming into the exam room with their own phones in their hands, and I say, let's put them down and let's talk to each other. But I think that what's really important is to establish from the very beginning not a police relationship between parents and kids, but a supportive one. And I often am telling parents who are understandably upset with their kids' use of their devices, et cetera, I say, stop policing them and start supporting their success, which both the parents and the kids kind of breathe a sigh of relief and say, look, we've got to talk about it. You just got to talk about it the same way you do when you send your kid off to a party where there might be alcohol. You say, I'm going to come and pick you up. If you don't feel ready to drive home, I don't want you driving home. There will be no questions asked. And we have to do the same thing, I think, with their devices.
That kind of reminds me when I do talks on technology safety for law enforcement on how to give presentations. I often say, don't be the don't police. We spend a lot of time telling kids don't, and we need to help kids with the do. What do you do? So Sonia, you've been involved in getting the message out on protecting kids online for a very long period of time. You've seen it from both the Australian perspective and now as you're working your magic here in the United States. What is it that you would recommend about how to get the message into the hands of parents and kids collaboratively?
For me, it's about creating compulsory education within our schools. I think online safety and healthy relationships education should be a part of every other part of education for our young people. So should building protective behaviours, critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence skills, so that we are doing more in the work of prevention for our children. We are equipping them as they begin their journey online. So as soon as they get that device, they have access to all kinds of awareness information, education information, and also to reporting mechanisms, and most importantly, support mechanisms. We tend to forget a lot about the importance of mental health and the importance of supporting our children to be able to cope with life in general. Life in general can be difficult. They come up against a lot of challenges. When you bring the internet into that, then all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of new layers of expectation, but also, of course, opportunity, but with that opportunity comes risk. And so I think that it's just vitally important to have communication, open communication, good education programs that are in line with what our children are doing every single day, that's appropriate to what they're actually experiencing and what they're seeing online. And so for our organisation, we use young people as our presenters in schools because they are on social media, they understand the landscape that young people that they're in, and also to making sure that we're educating parents about social media and apps. So what we say to parents is, as soon as you give your child that device, know the apps that are on that device and educate yourself about those applications so that you are very aware of location services, private chat functionality, that you are, when you're educated, that empowers you to be able to have open, honest communication with your child, and also for your child to understand that there are guidelines around the use of this technology. We don't put our child in a car with no driving experience. So we don't want to be putting them online with no life experience. We want to be giving them, guidelines around the use and making sure they're not only keeping themselves safe in this space, but they have the responsibility of keeping their entire family safe when they're navigating this space. So I think by being given that device, it's really important for young people to understand the responsibility around having that device provided to them. It's a privilege. It's paid for by parents. Devices are provided by parents, and along with that comes that responsibility to protect themselves.
So you started your response with education, mandated education in the schools. And so Pauline, I'm going to go to you because you are working in the schools. And there is an issue of sometimes being able to get some of this messaging into schools because sextortion begins with those first three letters. And so what is your recommendation about reaching into the school buildings with the message of prevention and maybe even language and how we talk about it?
You have to start with getting the parents okay, because some of the talks that we have for the vigilant parent, the parents ask, how can we have my kid get this talk? But in order to get it into the school, we have to have the parents pushing the schools in order to get it done, because being at the school, there is a lot of backlash with using certain words. And so we get a lot of complaints from the parents. So before we can bring it in there, we have to get the parents on board in order to approve, and they have to ask for it because, we have parents that opt out of just the sex education talks. They don't want their kids to hear that. So to get even beyond that, we have a lot of parents that opt their kids out. So we need to get the parents on board in order for the programs to be allowed in there.
And that's one of the reasons, Jo, that we use the term healthy relationships education. So that actually talks about the harmful effects of online pornography, what it means to have a healthy relationship. So we're not using the word sex education. And that really makes a difference in our education program that's delivered in schools all over Australia and is funded there.
I had one time where I was asked to come in and talk to 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at a parochial school, and the principal specifically said, please do not talk about sexting. So I said, okay, I won't include that. And then the day that I arrived, she said, would you please talk about sexting? We had an incident. And so 6th, 7th, and 8th is oftentimes the beginning of technology prevention that's being provided by task forces across the country and law enforcement across the country. What is actually the best age to start?
The age at which they first get technology. And I'm talking about the toddlers with their iPads, that these must be introduced to the kids as the power tools that they are. We don't hand a smartphone or an iPad to a tantruming 2-year-old any more than we should throw them the car keys, right? And say, calm down, go for a drive, right? That's basically what they're doing. You're opening the door to the world to them. And so I think that we need to introduce these technologies at the time when they need that power tool, when they can use it with responsibility and with respect for themselves and others. So I say, let's talk about technology from the get-go. And frankly, a 2-year-old will do better with a set of blocks than a smartphone anyway.
That's a great tip for everyone who has a 2-year-old at home.
And earplugs.
Yeah, and I will pass it on to my grandchildren. So, Sean, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of law enforcement going to schools and the issues, the benefits and the issues that go with that.
Yeah, we are finding the same thing where we're getting backlash, from schools. They don't want to have us come there and talk about these topics. With our program, we push it through the schools. So parents are contacting us all the time. They hear about the program. They hear about Ryan's story, and they contact us through our website, and we always refer them back to the school. And we make it to where the school has to be involved, and they have to facilitate it. They have to get all the parents to come to the class. And it seems to be working better than us just coming there and saying, hey, we want to do a presentation on this. There's a lot of backlash because if it's coming from the parents, and if you just go to a school and do an assembly and have a class on sextortion, yeah, you're going to get a lot of parents that are not going to be happy with that. So we get it to where it's the parents that want to be there, and then the message gets out, and we've seen our program grow exponentially because parents talk to parents, and it just keeps growing, and it seems to work a little bit better. Plus, we're encouraging the parents, like everybody said, to get involved as well. It just can't be us. We're encouraging parents to get involved very young as you can, talking with your children before you give them a device. So that's that's the positive as far as how we do it with the schools to get them involved instead of like just showing up. Maybe we're going to do a general assembly, all students got to be here. Then you're going to get a little backlash.
Do you find the benefit of social media from your task force to push out your messaging?
Yeah, we do push out our messaging. We have a Facebook page, but we don't have very many followers. But yeah, we try as best as we can. We have a website that we refer everybody to that contacts us. But yeah, social media plays a big part in pushing that out.
And Sonia, you've had quite a bit experience in Australia in formulating the legislative process to bring the mandated work in Australian schools and, of course, the e-safety commissioner position. So can you talk about the process that you went through, maybe the pushback that you felt, and the way you were able to overcome those?
Well, when I first lost Carly, I attended the very first Cyber Safety Summit in Canberra in Australia, which is our nation's capital. And that really began a conversation around the need for making sure that we are creating awareness, educating the community, not only children but families, and also creating government regulatory bodies to be able to protect the community overall. And so that really began my journey in working with the federal government, with working directly with the Attorney General and the Home Affairs Minister to essentially look at the different areas in which we were lacking. And the areas in which we were lacking was a one-stop reporting organisation for the public to be able to go to. And so I advised on the legislation to open the office of the e-safety commissioner, and essentially the regulatory powers of the e-safety commissioner Basically, if your child is harassed or something happens online and you report that incident to Instagram and you get no response, for instance, then you can take that report and make it to the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner, and they have the power to take down that material from social media sites. So they will approach the social media provider, request that takedown, and if that takedown doesn't take place, the provider is then fined daily until that material is taken down. So that's been a very successful system that's had a lot of takedowns in Australia. Then we've also worked to get the funding for the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, which has been successful, and also thankfully, I've been able to use my voice to get funding and support for law enforcement, for the specialised anti-child exploitation teams, to get them the tech they require, to be a voice in the media, to be able to take concerns to representatives and politicians, and to make sure that we're trying to support this area. There's so many different layers, and that was what brought me to draft Carly's Law, for instance, which was the first kind of law in the world being preventative legislation rather than reactive legislation. So Carly's Law makes it a crime to misrepresent your age and identity to a minor online and then attempt to meet that minor. And that was passed as federal law in Australia in 2017, and I'm now bringing that legislation here and having various meetings around how Carly's Law could potentially improve child protection laws here, and what we can do to give law enforcement the ability to be able to protect children before they're harmed rather than after the harm happens. Because the government spends trillions of dollars on trying to rehabilitate victims. So why can't we be putting more resources into more preventative measures? And that's across all areas: education, awareness, legislative amendments. And so that's, for me, a really important area of my work.
So you said rehabilitating victims, and I think that that's a really important part that you've addressed, is the idea that the victims now need services, and we could have prevented that from ever happening. We wouldn't be expending the billions of dollars on that, and we wouldn't have victims who are struggling with trauma.
And with that is having governments invest in good mental health services so that we're getting to children at a very young age and teaching them core values, what it means to, again, have those healthy relationships, where to go when life becomes difficult. Our children are quite vulnerable. They're looking for validation, they're looking for connection, they're looking for opportunity of their own. And that can sometimes make them very easy targets for the many criminals that are online looking to take advantage of those vulnerabilities. So how can we look at the greater picture as a society and go, okay, how can we better protect our children from a very young age and instill them with, the tools they need to be able to navigate what can be very difficult, in this life, lots of different experiences that come their way, and how can we best support them in that journey? So when they are given that device, when they are given the opportunity to connect online, they are equipped with the tools and support they need, which in turn then reduces the risk of them becoming victims of crime, victims of sextortion, cyberbullying, and then again, it's a far more positive approach in that, again, preventative area, so that we're not, pulling the child out of the river once they've fallen in. We want to get them by the hand before they fall in. And so it's really important for governments to recognise this, for representatives to be very aware of the problem that we're facing as a society, not only here in the US but globally. And how governments need to come together and really focus their efforts and in this area to, first of all, give more funding to law enforcement to help them to tackle this issue, to give law enforcement better legislative updates so that they can, rescue a child before they're harmed, and of course put more funding into education programs to be able to give children the skills they need to be able to navigate this space safely.
And you talked about victimization and the trauma of the victim. And Pauline, if you don't mind and if it's okay, can you talk a little bit about your other son and the trauma and the victimization he has suffered?
First of all, it started when he wasn't home when we found Ryan. So he was separated from us because we needed the investigation. So he spent multiple hours down in another city waiting to be allowed to come home. And so he had to hear over the phone that what happened to his brother, and he didn't understand. He's always my quiet one, so he's never been interested in social media. But now he uses his phone to check his email and text and has no social media. And I mean, just through the whole thing, it's hard for him to understand that someone could do this. And it's jaded him for other aspects. So someone had stole his password to his ATM card, his money card. And for him, it's like, nope, it's a scam. Who's contacting me? Then we look at it, I'm like, no, it actually is someone got into it. Your bank is really doing this, but he is so jaded and unsure about any contact with social media. He won't do any of that stuff. And I mean, this has been a really hard time. He lost his best friend. And it's hard because he does not understand that people out there could do this and target vulnerable kids. So he's become even though he was very introverted anyways, and now he's even more. And he doesn't trust much of anybody anymore.
So there has been a ripple effect to
Yes.
this situation for him. And I'm guessing that probably there's been some effect to some of Ryan's friends as well.
Yes. His friends were a very small, quiet group. And this has devastated him because he was the core that kept them together. He was the happy, cheerful one that kept him, when all of his friends were down, he is the one that picked them up. And so it was harder on them because they never thought that this could happen. And to them, even they couldn't understand it because not a lot of them had a lot of social media, and their friends on social media were just that small group. So it really had a reverse effect. A lot of them didn't want to go away to college. They wanted to stay close and in the area because they didn't want to be separated from the core group that they still had.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. Sean, you're saying you're dealing with a number of these cases now. And what is the general victim response to "I need help"? What is their call for help like, and how desperate do they feel?
The ones that are the most desperate are the cases that we get where the children are self-reporting. And they want help, but they don't want anybody to know. A lot of times they want to remain anonymous. A lot of times in the report it says, please, please do not tell my parents. I do not want my parents to know about this. So that's a tough decision for us when a 14-year-old is a victim of a crime on a police report and they don't want their parents to know. Obviously, they want the pictures taken down, but they just don't want anybody to know because they don't want to be shamed by it. So we will just talk. I spend countless hours because a lot of these cases, as we all know, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Philippines, criminally it's probably not going to go very far. So I spend a lot of time on the phone with parents and kids, and I always give kids the opportunity to explain, hey, it's really important for your parents to know, but I want you to tell them so they don't get a phone call from me. And eventually it helps, and they come forward and say, okay, I'll tell my parents first. Because like I said earlier, I don't want to get a phone call and find out, and it's been 4 or 5 days that my child has reported this, and I'm finding out now. But that is the biggest thing for them is they just don't want to be shamed. They don't want their pictures out there. They're afraid of what their friends are going to think, like Pauline said. And they're just ashamed that they got in that position. They don't want anybody to know about it.
So I want to ask about that victim, that child that's making that report. Is this the child that is really popular, really well-liked, really doing well in school, really engaged in a variety of things, or it's not or is it the child that's always in trouble, always dealing with problems, and is easy, I'm not saying correctly, but easy for someone to think, well, they did this to themselves? What are you seeing most often?
Yeah, we get that. I get that question all the time. Is this the troubled kid that lives in the group home, that lives in the foster care home? And it's the complete opposite. I know we're somewhere around 16 or 17 suicides in the country because of sextortion, and every one of those kids are athletes, very, very popular, tons of friends, like Ryan, in all kinds of clubs, the leader of his friend group. So it's a huge misconception of who these victims are. I think it's the victims that are into sports, into activities, really popular, are more likely going to be really, really active on social media, and they're the ones that become the victims.
And the feeling of, I have the most to lose.
Yes. And I think, with kids, and everybody knows about it, with kids, it's all about how many friends do I have? How many followers do I have? That's really all they are worried about, is how many followers. I have more followers than you. So we always try to talk to kids about that too, is like, do you really know these people? You call them their friends, but do you know them? Have you ever met them before? But it is definitely what I have seen in my cases. It's always very active, and for some reason, most of the time, they're athletes.
Thank you. And when you deal with youth in your practice, what is it that you're getting from them in their desperation, and what is it that you can give back to them to help them?
I would say that the primary thing I'm getting from them is I'm lonely. For all of our near infinite connectivity, in many ways, these devices have come between us, and it has actually eroded our connectedness, even though we have greater connectivity, because we use these devices to reach out to people in a lower risk environment, one that I don't feel as awkward in, And yet what that does is that we allow that fear of awkwardness, that fear of intimacy, frankly, to get in the way of really connecting in authentic ways with each other. Because what I say to the kids is, your real friends, unlike the ones you have as followers, your real friends are the ones who see and like you not just despite, but because of your limitations, because they complete you in a way, and you complete them. And those are the real friends that you can talk to at 3 a.m. when you're feeling desperate. And yet, a lot of these kids are, as you say, almost competitive in this. I actually had a patient who came to me devastated because her best friend from high school during her freshman year of college, which was going swimmingly from her social media with 967 friends, had attempted suicide in her dorm room because she felt alone, and because she was only telling half her story. She was only telling the good parts of her story, and so she was seeing other people showing the good parts of their story, and she was, knowing her own limitations, she was feeling less than. And I think that one of the things that we really have to think about here is, how do we move them toward more authenticity? And one of the things that I really speak about with parents is words matter, and I worry about the idea of parental controls. I talk to the tech companies about this all the time, because there's no kid on the face of this earth that wants to be controlled by their parents, right? I say we should change these to parental engagement tools, ways for parents to learn this power tool with their child, learning from them and teaching them at the same time, much the way they learn to drive a car, right? We sit white-knuckled in the front seat next to them while they try to get going and try to stop. but we don't teach them that car to say, don't hit that person, don't run over that. We teach them to drive. And I think the other piece of it too, and Joe knows this because we've talked a lot about this, is I want to go beyond internet safety to internet mastery. When we talk about internet safety, that is teaching the kids, you enter this space back on your heels in a defensive stance, fearful and protecting, rather than leaning into it and saying, I'm going to master this power tool. I'm going to help it make me stronger and better and smarter and, frankly, more empathetic. And also ask for empathy for myself. So I think that we really need to reframe the way we think about this because it's not going away. And the best software for protecting your kids sits between their ears.
We've all taught our children to drive. I use the driving lesson as a great example. As you and Sonia have both mentioned driving, I believe that it is a driving lesson. It is a make the car go forward and backward and left and right and understand the rules of the road. But one thing that parents always will do before they hand the keys over to their child with the car is to express their expectations. And that's the key component, is that expectations part. And
I totally agree. And in fact, I say to parents, have expectations, not rules, because rules to a kid are made to be broken. Expectations are very different. Rules can make mom mad at you. Expectations can make mom disappointed in you, and that really sucks.
that's a great line. Now, Sonia, I want to circle back to Australia in comparison to the United States. If you were able to take something that you were able to accomplish in Australia and bring that here, I know you already talked about Carly's Law, so that may be the one, but what is it that you would love the United States to embrace that Australia has as well?
I think an e-safety commissioner would be a great addition here to give the community a one-stop shop, so to speak, for all matters in relation to online safety. Of course, that be connected to NECMEC and reporting mechanisms that are already here. But I think there's a lot of confusion here in this country of where people need to go for certain issues that they're encountering online. So I would say definitely potentially an e-safety commissioner having those regulatory powers to be able to protect the community and support the community and get harmful material offline very quickly. I would also, of course, say Carly's Law, legislation that enables law enforcement to intercept a criminal accessing a child before they get their hands on that child. More preventative legislation. I think that's really important. I think that, you know, not only does it give law enforcement the ability to rescue a child before they're harmed, but it prevents that child from, you know, having to go through that trauma. Because once they face that trauma, then we're looking down the road of extensive support services, and depending on the resilience of that child will depend on their recovery, and depending on their support network will depend on that recovery. So we want to try and avoid that the best that we can. And I think compulsory education in this country in schools in relation to online practices, and also healthy relationships education. And also too, I would love to see a community impact statement included with a victim impact statement in court proceedings here in this country. We introduced one in Australia and it's worked really well. So the community impact statement goes alongside the victim impact statement and is read out in court and basically provides a judge before sentencing the impacts on the community of this crime type. So we're talking about the tidal wave effect of these crimes against children and what that means for the community. So how that's affecting law enforcement, all of you that are working tirelessly day in and day out, what you have to see, what you have to be a part of in order to create justice, how it's affecting families, service providers, how it's affecting the community as a whole, I think is a very important aspect. And in saying that, I'd just like to include my thanks to every single one of you in this room today for the incredible work that you do to protect the lives of children, and to remind you all that you are often the only light a child has. And so that is how important you are to the community. And I really wanted to make sure I got that across today, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Pauline, I want to reach to you as a special education educator because I think that's a unique situation for prevention. And then the needs of some of these kids in the way that they use technology and the way that we relay information to them about the safe use of that technology.
I'm amazed at some of the games and everything that I work with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and parents do a lot, they get a lot of freedom on there, and some of the games that they play, I've had to look up and figure out what they are, and I would never let my 17-year-old play some of these games. So it's amazing to me, but it's hard for us to have that conversation in school if their parents allow it. I mean, in their school, they're very restricted. What is allowed and that they can access online. I mean, our school district has blocks for certain things, so they want to play games, but they're not allowed. But it's really a hard situation because I've told some of them, my kids aren't allowed to play that. I don't allow those kind of games because they are very graphic and very. And then they use the chat features because, when they talk to people. And so I wish I could have it, but the parents if the parents allow it, there's not much would do in the classroom.
As they get older and they get more and more active online, do they have a special risk that other children may not have? Is there something that makes them more vulnerable?
Some of they are more accepting. If you've told me that, that's okay. Because one of our kids says, he takes everything literally. His example was, a kid says, hit me. Okay, and they do, because you told me to. Not all of them understand the difference of just because they say it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. They have a little bit more processing issues, so they take a lot of things literally. And so they would believe if they're more easily susceptible to saying, oh yeah, I'm a 12-year-old kid. They will usually accept it because they take it at face value. They don't have the processing of being able to say, maybe they're not. They believe what they hear.
And I would say that it's not limited to the special education.
No, it's
kids at
not.
all. In fact,
Ryan was the same way. He truly believed that he was speaking to a young, beautiful girl.
yeah. And I think we have to remember that the human brain develops back to front. The back of our brain is our visual cortex. The front of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is executive function, impulse control, future thinking, judgment, what we used to call the conscience, or the superego. And this is biology. And this doesn't get done until your mid to late 20s. And the people who figured that out before the neuroscientists was the car rental companies. Because, think about it, that was where the actuarial tables crossed between the risk they were taking and the benefit of renting that car. And I think that it's kids like Ryan that are just as vulnerable because in the natural biology of things, they weren't there yet. Yeah. They weren't there yet. And so when your 17-year-old at prom wraps the family car around a tree and dad says, don't you have a brain? The correct answer is, not that part. And so I think that we have to understand that we can't expect these kids to think and behave like an adult any more than we can expect a 6-month-old to walk.
Right, and I think I've even heard you say years ago, the parent question is, what were you thinking? And the answer is, they weren't. So, Sean, in your work, what are you doing to educate law enforcement, general law enforcement, not the ICAC detectives that are working for you, but general law enforcement on the issues of technology and victimization?
Yeah, we do our trainings all the time with my task force. In ICAC, it's always revolving. Everybody's always leaving, going, promoting. So we continue to do the trainings to teach them, because just like parents, a lot of the officers come in, they're older, they don't know what these apps are, they've never used them, they might be on one or the other. So we try to get the message out as early as possible when they come into our training, come into the ICAC program with my affiliates to educate them. And you know, we also tell, when in our class that we did, we started seeing a lot of parents that have never heard of some of these apps. They don't know what TikTok is, they don't know what Omegle is. So we always encourage them, if your child is gonna have this app, you should have the app. Because I think parents would change the way they allow children to go on these apps if they actually watched an app. I mean, if most parents went on TikTok, they probably would not let their child on TikTok or Omegle. But we did notice it was a disturbing trend in our class of parents have no idea, you know, what is this app? I've never even heard of this app, yet my 10-year-old has it on their phone.
So what is the one app that you would never want anyone to ever have?
Now you put me on the spot. I don't like Omegle. I think it's very dangerous, and I think TikTok is very dangerous.
All right, so if you think that they're dangerous, is it possible that somebody is using it in a good way?
I mean, Omegle, their tagline is "Talk to strangers." Mm-hmm. So if you're an adult, maybe that works for you. You know, you just want to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with kids knowing people from all over the world, but when a tagline on an app is "Talk to strangers," when we were growing up, all we ever did is say, "Don't talk to strangers," and now, what do we do when we go somewhere? We get in a car, an Uber with a stranger. So I mean, Omegle, yeah, there probably is maybe for adults. I don't think any child should be on Omegle. I don't think it's a good place. For those of you who don't know it, it's you log in and they just randomly set you up with whoever is available. There's no checks or balances. And same with TikTok. I guess there might be some good uses for TikTok, but I haven't seen them.
I think the color of hair probably defines why TikTok isn't.
Exactly.
Can I just add to that really quickly? I would say wherever there are children online, there are potentially criminals and predators on those platforms looking to exploit those children. So I think every app has a potential of becoming dangerous for children. And it's really important, as you mentioned, for parents to be very aware of the functionality of the app that their child's using, because only then are they able to set adequate privacy settings with their child, to have open conversation, and to remember to remind their child that their motivation comes from a place of love and care for them, that they're not wanting to restrict them, that they're wanting to create a shield of safety around their child and support them in their journey as they're growing and moving forward. I think that's a really important thing to include, because whenever we have families come to us, whether it be here in the States or in Australia, the first thing we remind children of is, why do you think your mum and dad did that? Why do you think they had this conversation? Or why do you think they might have removed your device from you? Because they love you. They care about you, they want the best for you, and their shoulders kind of drop and they become less defensive. And so I think teaching parents how to communicate adequately with their children, because a lot of parents don't know how to have that dialogue or how to approach these subjects. And so I think that's a really helpful aspect for parents, is to be able to help them to be able to communicate better with their kids.
I want to echo that and criticize you a little bit, Joe, in saying, I don't think we should point to one app or another as more dangerous than others.
As a matter of fact, that's where I was going.
Oh, okay. I stepped on his line.
Because I brought that up for a specific reason, because the audience are people who are seeing the worst of the worst. And what I wanted to do was transition away from the idea that there are all these bad apps out there and that some apps can be used for good. So my next question...
Maybe any app can be used for good. It's how you use it.
It's behavior, not the technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where I'm transitioning back to you,
We're
Michael.
doing a little Abbott and Costello thing here,
Yeah.
sorry.
So who's on first? So the idea is, I want the message to be relayed, however you choose to relay it, but I want the message is technology all bad?
No, technology is neutral. Technology is how we use it. Now, there is good argument that we build the technology and thereafter it shapes us. But think about it. Let's take it to a simpler form of a shovel. You can use a shovel to bash someone over the head, or you can dig up a field and plant it. And I think that that's why I say the most important software is between your kids' ears. Because if we can, from the get-go, teach them the power of these tools to do amazing things, to learn amazing things, to connect with experiences and places and people that otherwise they would never have had the chance to, even a decade ago. But to understand that the world is not all nice, all wonderful, and that they need to be not fearful of it all, but aware and conscious. And one of the things that I really think about a lot is going with your analogy of the child by the river. In public health, we talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. Primary prevention is keeping that kid from falling into the river at all. Secondary prevention is teaching the kid to swim, so when she or he falls into the river, they can swim. And tertiary prevention is what many of us in this world are having to do with sextortion, et cetera, which is after the fact. After the fact, how do you prosecute, how do you protect, them or others in the future? And one of the things that strikes me about this is, we talk about with terrorism, if you see something, say something. And I think that we are in a state of terror around the internet, social media apps, et cetera. And what we need to do is teach the kids, if you see something, say something, as early as possible, even if it's just an annoyance, as early as possible. And to really step out there and actually, as you were saying, Sonia, how do we get the kids to talk to each other? We listen so they will talk, and we talk so they will listen.
And it's all around opportunities versus risks. And making sure that we're equipping them with the tools that they need to be able to have a positive experience online, and that comes back to those protective behaviours, critical thinking skills. They're so important as a part of helping our children navigate this space. And unfortunately, whenever something great is invented in this world, there's always some criminal to take advantage of that technology to use it to harm. And this is the issue that we're dealing with as a society, is there are obviously many bad people in the world that want to take advantage of others and harm others. So how can we help our children to, again, put that shield of protection around them to help them to deflect that kind of contact, and to be able to use the internet to be able to enhance their experience in their journey and opportunity and friendship group. And so that's really where I want to see education going, really empowering young people to be leaders in their community, to empower young people to be advocates for our children, to really empower youth to pull together and really create a positive environment and deflect some of those negative contacts that they're having to deal with, and know where to report, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we could go on and on and on, but that is not going to be acceptable. So I want to say I have been honored to have a conversation with the four of you, and particularly I want to single out Pauline and Sonia. And thank you so much for sharing your stories and the stories of your children. And I wish you could all get to know these people. But in the meantime, please give them a round of applause for their time today.